Hello, welcome to another Teachertopian tutorial. We're going to be looking at topic 3, subtopic identifying vulnerabilities, which is 3.2.3 on the specification curriculum map. And it's all part of the Edexcel GCSE Computer Science course. And we're going to be looking at 3 different areas here, primarily. That's going to be, which could come up in the exam, audit trails, it's code reviews, and this idea of robust software design. And let's put considerations. So those are the 3 things we're going to be discussing for identifying vulnerabilities. And it's quite good that a topic like this is in the syllabus, because it sort of mirrors what might happen in a professional context. So of course, many of you might be aware of something like GitHub, right? And you could view GitHub as a manner of audit trails, because there's going to be a trace of a list of changes, essentially. So we've got a list of changes that have been made to any code. Let's say we've got some software and user A has modified something about it. So there's going to be a time, a date, the user ID of the changes that were made, and when it was done, and it will all be in chronological order. So it's all going to be in order, so that any changes can be traced back to their original. And this will help people identify bugs and any flaws. For example, if most of the bugs that were reported were after an update by user B on the 5th of May, then we can poke around at the changes that were made then and try to better identify what led to a potential bug or flaw in that change in the code, and then hopefully understand bugs, security flaws to implement a patch. So if we've found a bug or a flaw, we can add a patch to it to try and correct it. So that's what I would probably have in my mind. I would have GitHub just as an analogy of remembering what an audit trail might be, because any changes that were made are all listed chronologically. But of course, internal audit trails happen all the time, and companies will have it's very common for Git repositories. And they could be made private as well, but you'll be committing push and pulls for files to a server, and all of those push and pulls will be recorded. And crucially, older versions of your file will be there as well. So if there was a problem, you could revert back to the original one before things get too out of hand. So that's quite nice that that's in there. Code reviews. The idea, and we'll do exam style questions soon. Code review involves checking your program code. You've got your program code, checking it through with a colleague or partner. So I'll put check code with a colleague or a partner to find errors that might have been left in it. So you could also say peer review. Again, you might want to think of GitHub in a similar way to this, because everything's public. That the public any changes are viewable by the rest of the user base, and they might be able to peer review it and say, great changes you made. However, have you thought about the potential vulnerability of this? Have you considered using this plugin instead? Something like that. So you can streamline. What are the advantages to this? You could streamline development. Very first, let's say if you're using an iPhone and you get a new iOS update, I never install the very first one for a major release, because it's guaranteed to have all sorts of bugs that are untested. The public are then going to inform Apple to fix certain things, and then just wait for the next one or two incremental updates, and they'll fix most of the bugs. That seems to be what happens most of the time now, which is rather frustrating, because when I was a lot younger, you would buy a piece of software and it would need to have been thoroughly tested, because it would be difficult to change it, modify it, or recall it. But anyway, we live in a different world, so let's move on. So let's look at robust software design considerations in a bit more detail, what might come up in the exam. So we might want to anticipate misuse of software. How could it be misused? Unfortunately, there are lots of when you've got very relatively few operating systems, people are going to find vulnerabilities in them, and it's quite a cynical world that we live in now, I'm afraid, and all the major companies have probably been hacked, or there's been data breaches of most people's data by now. As I'm recording this video, major high street retailers are just being attacked, and hackers do it because they can extort money from cryptocurrencies and various other things, because it's relatively easy to do. You can put a team together and just say your only job for the next month is to poke around and explore vulnerabilities, and we have this open web. Tim Berners-Lee gifted it to the world, and with that becomes some responsibility from the users as well. But not all of them are people who are desirable, shall we say. So unfortunately, ethical jobs like ethical hacking are important, forensic computing, because we need to scrutinize our software and make sure that it can't be misused. So some other concepts here. Let's put validation stroke verification. And there's another issue here, authentication. So it might be rather cumbersome and actually inconvenient to have something like two-factor authentication. Every time you seem to log onto a website nowadays, it says, I'll link it to your phone, or we'll send a passcode to your phone, or we've sent a passcode to your email, or download this authenticator app. Highly confusing for elderly people, but unfortunately these systems are in place to try and circumnavigate the bad actors in the world who are exploiting software and operating systems for their own personal gain. So you can verify documents with things like checksums, and of course a lot of devices now have biometrics, so you might be using your fingerprint or even retinal scans, facial scans, of course, Face ID for Apple. And two-factor authentication is quite effective, because if a hacker would need control over multiple devices of yours in order to beat that. It's not impossible for them, but it just makes it harder. and less opportunistic. And authentication is really just checking somebody is who they say they are. So it's very typical now when you speak to banks that they want lots of special information, passcodes, date of birth, names, plus they want to have certain digits of your security numbers, and they might then you might have to use an app to do certain things. So yes, everything is just becoming more difficult to do, because that's that unfortunately we live in a world where there's necessity for that. PIN numbers obviously are still in use for authentication, user ID, biometrics. So these are all part of authentication. So you might have someone's fingerprint, you might have an eye, you might have a PIN number, all sorts of different methods there. That is a finger I've drawn. Sorry, that's not a very good drawing, is it? Oh well. So let's look at an exam style question. Here we go. A team of developers is using an audit trail when working on a program, and state 2 advantages of keeping an audit trail. All right, so we've already just looked at some of those advantages. Record, change the color. There's going to be a record of who changed. I'm just abbreviating the answer here. Who changed what and when it was done. Okay, so I'll put date here. So that's a good one. And you could also put improves accountability. Program can be rolled back to an earlier version that we knew worked, and you'll know the exact point, no point of failure, or point of error, should we say. So there are 4 different things just straight off the bat that you can answer. You only need 2 to get the 2 marks there, but that would be more than enough, I'd say, for audit trail. And I would have in my mind, as an analogy, something like GitHub, because it's quite a nice way of remembering some of these concepts. What else would we do here? I think we could have code review. Okay, so that's a slightly different topic here. Carried out by a programmer or an automated system. Both methods cost money, right? Complete the table with one other disadvantage of each method. So it should be noted that a code review, it doesn't need to be done by a human being. It can be done by some specialist software which scours the code and looks for vulnerabilities or issues. It's probably best to have a combination of both, quite frankly, but especially with this age of AI, you can't just trust AI to do everything you need. So what could be some disadvantages apart from costing money? Because that would be the obvious answer. Well, I would just keep this simple. Human error. People make mistakes. They don't always identify things correctly. Extra labor. I mean, it's another wage, isn't it? It's another factor in there. You need your HR departments, and you need all those things there, extra person, resources, even if you outsource it to a freelancer. And the programmer has to be experienced. You have to have an experienced programmer. And also you could say increases development time, increasing development time potentially, getting humans to review it. I mean, if you just stuck it through an automated system, it would be pretty quick. The manager could probably do it themselves. However, there's a reason why programmers or humans identify patterns and flaws sometimes better than automated systems, because they can think about how other systems were made to be vulnerable, and they might have a lot of experience there. So the automated system may not, so I put may not identify all issues. I mean, that's the common sense answer. So only well-known problems. Yeah, it's a bit. I mean, the analogy I might use is maybe some anti-malware software, antivirus software. That yes, if there's an automated system checking for existing virus signatures, yeah, of course, it's going to find it. However, for something new that hasn't been detected yet, you might need a human being scouring through and thinking, oh, there's something off with that, and then discovering it in the first place. And that could sort of, save a company a lot of money if they got the programmer to do it. So, a code review can be done by a system or a specialist, and they identify bugs and security flaws or bad practice. That's what they do. So I think those two questions give you a flavour of what you might see in the exam itself, and hopefully that is enough to sort of give you some confidence with questions that might come up.